As Americans, we cannot allow this to continue. It is time to liberate our communities from this scourge of drug addiction.
A leaked internal report from a federal agency sent shockwaves across the United States. 1.8 tons of narcotics, 312 firearms, and more than $142 million in cash were seized in a single operation. But what truly stunned the public was this. At the center of the network was not a street gang, but the office of a state judge in Georgia. The man's name was Marcus Hale, 54 years old, once honored for what officials called his contribution to the state's justice system. In a photo hanging inside the courthouse, he was shaking hands with the governor, smiling beneath the motto, "Justice for All." Yet behind that image, the FBI believed there was a secret capable of shaking the foundation of the entire system. According to the report, 20 pounds of heroin were found hidden behind a false wall inside Hale's suburban home. Next to it were $2.4 million in cash and a tactical weapons locker filled with rifles and handguns, all carefully coated in protective oil. But the most chilling detail was his phone, still unlocked, showing encrypted messages exchanged with Tendagua, a Venezuelan drug lord once listed on Interpol's most wanted roster. If you believe justice should stand with the people, subscribe to this channel, because today's story is not just a case. It is an open-heart surgery on the very body of public power. At 5:42 that morning, the quiet neighborhood in Cobb County woke to the faint hiss of tires on a misty road. 5 armored SUVs, without license plates, stopped in front of house number 1764. The doors opened in unison. Figures in black body armor poured out. No sirens, no warnings, only the sweep of green laser beams crossing the windows. "Stack ready," a cold voice answered. Then came the crash of a hydraulic ram striking the steel door, shaking the hallway frames and making the pictures rattle on the walls. Inside, a faint light spilled from the upstairs bedroom. The clock read 5:43. Agents moved in like a storm. They advanced in triangular formation, each step calculated to avoid contaminating evidence. In the kitchen, the coffee pot was still warm. In the living room, a framed picture of Hale in a black robe before the American flag had fallen face down, the glass cracked clean through, like a prophecy of the collapse they were about to uncover. The false wall behind the bookshelf was spotted by a thermal camera. After breaking through the brick, agents found tightly packed blocks of heroin, sealed with Cartel logos and heavy plastic, stacked neatly like warehouse inventory. Next to them were dozens of cash bundles, brand new $100 bills, still in serial order. In the basement, a steel vault was filled with automatic weapons, most with serial numbers ground off. In a leaked internal recording, one investigator broke the silence with a sentence that froze the entire team. "This isn't corruption, it's loyalty. Loyalty to the cartel, not to this country." Hale's phone was unlocked using his own fingerprint. Inside were encrypted messages with Tendagua, discussing safe corridor timing, shipment schedules, and even court rulings timed with port arrivals. One decrypted text read, "Run 38 loads this quarter, same route, no roadside interference." If that number reflected reality, 38 runs in 3 months meant nearly a ton of heroin and fentanyl crossing the southeastern United States without a single checkpoint. From financial records seized at the scene, forensic accountants traced $41.7 million moved over 6 years through 47 shell companies registered in Delaware, Panama, and Curacao. Each company had valid papers, legal addresses, and separate bank accounts, but not one had a single employee or tangible product. The money was transferred under labels such as consulting fees, legal expenses, and economic research. Each quarter, roughly $2 million flowed through the network, small enough to avoid FinCEN scrutiny, yet large enough to wash the cartel's illegal proceeds. An investigator later remarked, "From the outside, he looked like a judge making smart investments, but inside, he was running a machine that legalized blood money." In Hale's calendar, meetings marked as lunch, golf, or case review matched the schedules of 12 local officials and 3 senior police officers. Cross-checking bank statements revealed over $8.3 million, leaving an intermediary account just hours after those meetings. The transaction notes contained only 2 words: retainer cleared. This was no longer the failure of one man. It was a methodical betrayal, shielded by the very symbols of justice. By the end of the day, the FBI released provisional figures: 1.809 tons of narcotics seized, including heroin, fentanyl, and methamphetamine. 312 firearms recovered, many with serial numbers removed. $142 million in cash, gold, securities, and frozen accounts. 21 officials and law enforcement officers accused of taking bribes. A spokesperson inside the Department of Justice briefing room described it bluntly. This is not a criminal network hiding in the shadows. It's a network in suits walking through government metal detectors every morning. Within minutes of the first news broadcast, social media exploded. One Georgia resident called it the greatest betrayal since Watergate. International media compared it to the collapse of public trust, wearing the seal of a court. Analysts saw something even darker. If one judge could clear a safe passage for a cartel, how many other Marcus Hales might be sitting quietly in other states doing the same? This case didn't just expose one man, it exposed a system, a place where integrity could be bought with contracts and signatures, and when trust is sold, the law becomes nothing more than stamped paper. The evidence had been sealed, the steel doors had gone silent, but the screen didn't fade to black, it only changed form. When the smoke cleared from the scene, the investigation moved into the world of numbers. From dust-covered bills laced with traces of heroin, the FBI began tracing a hidden financial network behind layers of shell corporations, where dirty money flowed quietly, transaction by transaction, through the same banking systems that ordinary citizens used to deposit their paychecks. Inside the task force's temporary office in Atlanta, agents began examining hard drives seized from Judge Hale's residence. On one screen appeared a single file labeled Ledger 6Y, Legal Consultancy. When the decryption software finished, the data unfolded line by line. Consulting fee, $420,000. Vendor, Curacao Holdings BV. Research services, $195,000. Vendor, Panama Equity SA. Every transfer code matched Hale's personal account at a Delaware bank. Financial analysts described the moment as looking into the spine of a monster. Money flowing from South America through 3 intermediaries, washed clean by bureaucratic language, and returning to the United States disguised as legitimate investment. In total, preliminary estimates showed $41.7 million moved through 47 shell companies over 6 years. None had employees or products. Each existed only long enough to clean cartel proceeds under labels like legal consulting, policy research, or attorney training contracts. One investigator wrote, "These companies weren't built to do business. They were built to disappear after they served their purpose." The trail of money was cold and metallic. One end began in Caracas, where the cartel stamped its shipments. The other ended in Delaware, where the legitimate financial system had unknowingly become a machine that polished blood-stained profits. In Washington, FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, stepped in. Analysts reviewed hundreds of suspicious activity reports filed by banks between 2018 and 2024. Over 260 of them shared the same pattern: legal advisory, retainer, research consulting. It was a sign of a network that had learned to live between the cracks of oversight. When the data was cross-referenced, the center of the network emerged. Meridian Equity Group, a company founded by Hale 8 years earlier, registered under a rented mailbox in Marietta. From its account, over $2 million flowed every quarter, perfectly matching the dates marked golf in Hale's personal calendar. One agent observed, "It's like 2 parallel worlds, one ruled by law and one by money," and he was the bridge between them. Once the flow of money was mapped, the investigation turned to digital forensics. Hale's office computer was sent to the FBI's technical lab in Quantico. The drive was triple encrypted, using the same password found on his phone, Justice Cydra 1. After 8 hours of decryption, the screen revealed a spreadsheet named Q1, Logistics. Each row listed a shipment, date, weight, coded label, destination. The last column had a single word, cleared. When matched with customs records, 19 entries aligned exactly with container arrivals at the ports of Savannah and New Jersey over 14 months. The shipments traced a line along Interstate 95, the main artery of the Eastern Transport Corridor. When the data points appeared on the map, the red marks curved into a perfect line, like a bloodstream. The analysis lead said quietly, "We've just found the main artery of the network, and it runs straight through the heart of the justice system." Another file, Legal Permissions, listed 12 local officials and 3 police officers beside notes that read, "Delay notice, cleared. Weekend ruling, confirmed. Secure corridor, no inspection." If verified, those notes would prove direct interference from within the enforcement system itself. But the most chilling part wasn't the data. It was the normalcy of how it existed. No secret servers, no hidden apps, just Excel sheets, Outlook emails, and synchronized calendars. No hackers, no aliases, just authority. And that authority, once left unchecked, had turned keyboards into weapons and signatures into passage orders. The data was then cross-referenced with Department of Justice systems. When consulting fees were paired with shipments marked cleared, the truth became clear. Each consulting contract was the price of silence. Each legal research entry was a container that slipped through inspection without a question. The investigation entered the stage known as the digital chain of custody. Every drive, memory card, and file was labeled, signed, and sealed. One wrong signature, just one, could invalidate the entire case in court. Forensic teams worked 32 straight hours to finalize each transfer. From Hale's hard drive, over 17,000 files were extracted, including 1,200 deleted emails. Many contained character strings matching the names of Panamanian companies, with attachments describing goods under simple code. When cross-checked with customs data, multiple shipments matched perfectly. Date, weight, and container number. That meant Hale hadn't just protected the trade, he was coordinating it. In the dim light of the analysis room, the glow of the servers reflected on exhausted faces. One agent whispered, "It started with the sound of a door breaking, but it ends with a spreadsheet." A quiet line, yet it captured the essence of the case. The investigation was no longer about heroin behind brick walls, but about the cold logic of data, where money, power, and law intertwined like lines of code. On the main screen, the network map expanded. 47 central nodes, 132 secondary points, over 600 accounts. The cash flow pulsed like a living vein, beating in rhythm with international banking cycles. At the center, one label flashed, Meridian Hub, verified. That was the core company, and the starting point of the next operation, Operation Crosscut. Yet amid the fatigue, someone murmured, behind all these numbers, there are still people fighting to give meaning back to the word justice. Not everyone was compromised. There were still agents, auditors, and forensic engineers working tirelessly behind the screens. People who didn't carry guns, but carried the burden of keeping the truth alive. And it was they, not the money, who would stand at the front line of what came next. In Washington, once the financial network was verified, Operation Crosscut was given the green light. What began as a probe into one man had now expanded into a federal mission to dismantle the entire chain of transport, finance, and protection that Judge Marcus Hale had helped build. At 5:30 in the morning, a synchronized command rippled through the encrypted channel shared by the FBI, DEA, and ICE. Every unit received the same message: action, all units. No sirens, no cameras, only red lights blinking inside coordination centers across 7 states. In Savannah, Georgia, a row of old warehouses along the Chatham River suddenly became the focus. From the outside, they looked abandoned. Peeling walls, rusted shutters, but thermal scanners revealed movement inside. A brief command rang out. The entry team breached the side door. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Dust rising as voices shouted, "Clear! Move in!" Within 3 minutes, 14 suspects were detained. 92 kilograms of heroin and 41 kilograms of fentanyl were seized. At the same time in Houston, Texas, a factory in the Westfield Industrial Zone was surrounded. The steel gate was rammed open. 2 armed men tried to flee across the rail line, but were stopped by K9 units. Inside, the air reeked of chemicals: acetone, ether, and industrial alcohol. On the tables lay glass trays, dusted with white powder, mid-production. A soundproof room contained an industrial vacuum press used for compressing narcotics into blocks. Each brick carried a torn emblem of justice, the cartel's mark, known as the Seal of Silence. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, federal agents and state police blocked off a suburban area near Newark. From above, drones spotted 3 trucks leaving a container yard. Orders were issued to stop them, but the drivers accelerated. When the second truck was intercepted, agents found that the containers were disguised as humanitarian aid. Beneath the false cargo were compressed packages of heroin and cocaine. Inside the coordination hub, digital maps lit up one by one: Georgia, Texas, New Jersey, Illinois, Alabama, Florida, New York. Within 15 minutes, the entire network collapsed. Operation Crosscut recorded 1.8 tons of narcotics seized, 312 firearms recovered, and $142 million in cash, gold, and securities locked down. But what truly shook investigators was not in the evidence bags. It was in a filing cabinet in Newark. When agents broke the lock and pulled it open, they found hundreds of laser-printed sheets. Each page listed a name, a position, and a transfer code. At the top of several pages, one handwritten line stopped the room cold. Hale guarantees clearance. Do not deviate. It meant one thing. Hale guaranteed passage. No mistakes, no interruptions. This was not just a judge breaking his oath. This was a judge signing his name beneath a criminal engine operating inside the justice system. In Washington, the Department of Justice called an emergency meeting. On the table lay 47 red folders, each labeled with the name of an accused official or officer. Among them were 12 sheriffs, 3 district prosecutors, 1 state transportation director, and 2 officials tied to federal funding. According to the evidence, they had accepted payments or ignored suspicious reports. Closed-door meetings ran for 48 hours. Legal teams divided the material into 3 streams: finance, transport, legal exposure. All evidence was moved into a secured holding center at FBI Quantico. At this point, the case was no longer just a raid. It had become a test of whether justice in America could turn its scrutiny inward. Inside Georgia's government buildings, a chain reaction began. 2 sheriffs resigned. A state legislator issued a public statement. Trust cannot be rebuilt with speeches. It must be earned with transparency. Towns held community forums. Outside courthouses, people stood with signs that read, "If the law is criminal, what justice remains?" Not everyone stayed quiet. A former DEA investigator spoke out. No one wants to believe justice can be bought, but silence is its own form of complicity. His words spread quickly and were shared millions of times across social media. International outlets called it the Crosscut Purge, a purge inside government ranks not seen on this scale since Watergate. Legal experts suggested the case could become a model for internal anti-corruption operations in the coming decade. For the first time, the primary targets were not smugglers at the border. They were the holders of government seals. A preliminary report to Congress listed 184 individuals charged, 21 from law enforcement, 5 from administrative offices, 158 tied to finance or logistics, 48 properties were seized, 29 bank accounts were frozen, 8 independent auditing firms were assigned to track suspicious flows. Yet Crosscut did not end with celebration. In a quiet corridor of the Department of Justice, one agent told a colleague, "We cleared the trash, but the smell is still here, because the roots go deeper than the law." As night fell, the lights of FBI headquarters reflected in the glass. It looked like a reminder. Justice does not survive on belief alone. It survives through constant verification. And somewhere in an evidence vault, the sheet of paper with the line, "Hale guarantees clearance," remained sealed in its envelope. Not for its monetary value, for what it represented. When law is bent to serve power, a simple page becomes a mirror held up to an entire system. After Operation Crosscut, the United States did not simply return to normal. The storm left the warehouses and spreadsheets and moved into public life, into courtrooms, classrooms, council chambers, and street cafes. People no longer asked only, "Who committed the crime?" They asked, "What did the system ignore so this could grow?" In Georgia, courthouses that had been sealed reopened after months of review. Inside, desks still bore FBI tape. Stacks of halted case files lay marked with a red stamp that read, "Void," across unsigned rulings. The press called it the era of seals, a time when citizens even feared the symbol of justice itself. In Washington, the Senate held 4 days of hearings. Former DEA agents, former prosecutors, and legal scholars sat in rows and read their statements. When one senator asked, "If a judge can help move thousands of pounds of narcotics for a cartel, who can we still trust?" No one answered. The silence in the chamber was its own verdict. But in the wreckage, some began rebuilding. The state of Georgia created the Federal Judicial Ethics Commission, an independent body of 11 members empowered to review assets and transactions of all court officials. New rules followed: mandatory income disclosures, limits on gifts, quarterly monitoring of financial irregularities. The cost of the Hale case was now being repaid in structural reform. Communities stepped in as well. In Atlanta, law students formed the Clear Line Project. They used open data tools to track public budgets and consulting contracts. In Chicago, independent journalists built a public money map to show where government funds truly flowed. In New York, civil groups launched Transparency First, calling for full disclosure of court expenditures. Their message was simple: if justice needs light, then open the windows. Back at the FBI, the Crosscut team received no medals, no televised ceremony, only a short meeting where the unit chief said, "We are not here to be praised, we are here to clean what others hope to hide." Then everyone went back to work. Some transferred to other posts, others kept following new leads because they knew Crosscut was not truly over. 2 months later, buried inside a lengthy Department of Justice report to Congress, one small line appeared. 4 additional networks under review. The case of Marcus Hale was only one branch, one point where law and organized crime had shaken hands. In Cobb County, Hale's former home stood seized and fenced off. Locals called it the house without windows. The frames were still there. The trust was not. In one televised segment, a neighbor said, "He used to punish people for lying. Now we just want to know who will hold him to the same standard." Editorials spread across major outlets. One magazine described it as an age of ethical bleaching. Another wire service wrote, "Narcotics do not only destroy bodies, they corrode trust when the keepers of the scales are bought with other scales." One network commented, "There is no prison large enough to contain this level of betrayal." In September of the following year, a federal court opened the formal trial of Marcus Hale. He appeared with white hair and a vacant expression. As prosecutors read the list of 184 defendants tied to his network, he did not look up. When asked, "Do you have anything you wish to say to the American people?" he answered with 3 words. "I was loyal. Honest. No. Cold. Yes." The words froze the courtroom. They revealed what unchecked power can become. Loyalty cut free from justice. The verdict followed: life in prison with no possibility of parole. Yet the story did not end there. Other states began reopening files on officials with unexplained wealth. Civil groups pushed for a Public Integrity Act to require regular financial disclosures from all enforcement officials. When the cameras left, what remained were people: agents, technicians, auditors, individuals who had traded sleep and certainty to uncover the truth. One of them wrote in the final report, "There is no permanent justice. There are only people who refuse to stop defending it." Today, if you walk through the government district in Georgia, you will find a small plaque in front of the Cobb County Courthouse. It does not mention Marcus Hale. It does not name the case. It carries a single line: "Justice does not begin in the courtroom. It begins the moment one person refuses to close their eyes."